Okay, we start again. So in this PPB story, our experience is that one of the more difficult aspects is not the technical aspect, but the relationship of the researcher, the extension agent, with the farmer. So.
Yes, this is happening in all countries, even though in different ways. In the country in which I started with PPB in Syria, even when I managed to convince the local scientists to come with me and have meeting with farmers, their attitude toward farmers never really changed. Their attitude was, during a conversation, was always to tell. It was always a one-way communication. And privately, those farmers eventually told me that they had the impression, in discussing with their local scientists, with whom, of course, the language was not a problem, but it was a problem with me, that the scientist will ask a question, and while the farmers was answering, looking at the scientist straight in the eyes, the farmer had the impression that the scientist was not listening, was thinking about the second question to ask. And farmers have, at least this is my experience, have an enormous ability to capture these feelings, to feel the atmosphere of a meeting. And one of the major problems that I have in the countries where I'm working is to convince local scientists to stick with the time. If they are given an appointment to the farmers, they should try their very best to be there on time, because farmers not only are very busy people, but they are festival people, and they need to be respected. So if sometime I'm late, I try to inform the farmers, now that we have mobiles and so on, as soon as I realize that I will not make it on time, which is the same that I will do with anybody else, with my boss, with my technician. It's just a normal attitude. It boils down to just one word: respect. And it's very difficult for scientists, particularly I found in developing countries. In developed countries, I don't know, probably because of the different type of education, or because it's much less of a difference in status symbol, being a scientist not sure whether his contract will be extended at the end of the year, as it is now in many countries in Europe, or a farmer. And on this issue, I always remember one scientist who eventually became one of my colleagues at ICARTA. When he was a scientist in Morocco, he told me, I said, but you know, Salvatore, for you is different. You are a foreigner here, and you don't have anything to lose in talking to a farmer. If my boss sees me spending time in discussing with farmers, I'm sure that the first question will be, said, hey guy, we spend a lot of money to send you to US to get a PhD, and now you need to talk to the farmers? So there is a feeling of sort of losing their prestige. It's something that is very difficult to understand. In fact, one message that I'm trying to convey is that never forget that these guys have got 2 legs and 2 arms and are basically human beings like you. And as such, they deserve respect, regardless of what they know or what they do not know.
How would you say, what characterizes your relationships with farmers? How would you characterize it? Do you see them as your friends? Is it a professional relationship? Is it a learning relationship?
In many cases, they are my heroes. I mean, if I had the possibility of doing so, I will erect monuments for farmers who are able to continue to farm in places in which when you are planting, you are not sure that you will harvest a crop. And they are still there, and they are in love with the environment surrounding them. They are very interested to learn. There are many things that I was told when I joined ICARDA 30 plus years ago that are not true. I mean, one of the first things that I was told is be careful, life of a breeder is very difficult because farmers are very reluctant to change. And this is true, of course. If you bring a variety which yields less than what they have, I don't know why they should change. But they are certainly very open to innovation. You have seen also in the meetings that we are having today how many questions there are, and the moment you ask, are you interested to look at 80 new varieties of wheat, they immediately say yes. And so I consider them as, well, in many cases, I have established a relationship which go beyond the best relationship that I have with some of my scientist colleagues, farmers who have named their children after the name of my children, farmers who have been crying when I told them that I will leave Syria. I have a very deep relationship with them, like friends. And this is something which develops with time. It just doesn't come out by itself. I also consider that is for me, in theory, should be more difficult than for a local scientist, because I don't speak the language. Very often I'm from a different religion. Of course, I have a completely different background. So all the conditions are there for not becoming friends. And eventually, I became a much closer friend than the local scientists. And I think that from my side, the only element which contribute to this is respect. One Syrian farmer by the name of Ahmed, one day we were just the two of us with with the technician who is helping me in this work in Syria. And because we were a little bit ahead of schedule and the other farmers did not yet join the meeting, we start sort of philosophizing on why we established such a good relationship. Again, he's a Muslim, I'm a Christian. You know, we have a completely different background, and yet there was this tie which was growing stronger day after day. And he was telling me that one critical moment in our relationship was when I invited him, together with another group of farmers, to an event in Etikata, during which I took the opportunity to introduce him and the other farmers to the Director General of ICARDA. So we were in a sort of circle, and I was telling the Director General the names and where they were coming from. And Ahmed told me, he said, you know, I was observing you very closely. And I couldn't believe my eyes that you were talking to your Director General exactly in the same way in which you are talking to me. And this for me has been a revelation that, you know, that I was as important for you as your Director General. And you have all the interest of showing deference towards your Director General because your job and your salary are depending on that person. And yet, you did the same to me. And your life is not going to be affected by what I'm saying or what I'm doing. So this is basically probably the reason of establishing such a good relationship. So how do you try to inculcate this sense of respect for other people, regardless of what they are? I have the impression that having developed these, I never had so many relationships with other people as I did when I started to PPB, and I noticed that now if I walk downtown, I tend to have the same sort of respect for people that I've never met. I mean, helping somebody on the bus, things that Probably I've done also before, but now I notice that I have an attitude towards people surrounding me which is different from before.
Morde! She's in your background. Okay. Again. Let's wait for the wind. Just one moment. I'm gonna ask the next question. Yeah. Okay. Okay. This sense of respect that you think is at the basis of this good relationship. Once you have this sense of respect, in practical ways, how does it manifest itself in this relationship in the field, for example? How do you start the conversation in the field? How do you give information? How do you receive? How do you ask questions?
Well, I'm always trying to start a relationship with a new group of farmers when I first met them, to try to give the impression which is honest, that I'm there to learn as much as possible from them, because very often I'm sitting in an environment that I do not know very well. I do not know the agricultural practices. I do not know what are the most important crop. And this, which is, in my opinion, a technical necessity, it also has an effect in switching the relationship immediately with the farmers actually being driving the conversation, because usually is the scientist who goes to a village and teach, and we have an example in this country. Now I try to start the relationship in exactly the opposite way, that the farmers start feeling that they have actually something, that they know something that I do not know. And I think that this is the first moment in which the balance starts becoming on equal level. And then usually when I suggest things, I really suggest things. I never tell them this is what you should do. And I've heard colleagues from Syria in this conversation without before and without having established any human relationship, simply telling the farmers, oh, of course this is happening, because you don't know that, and they were giving a lecture. And of course, that's not, I mean, the farmer may listen to you, but he's certainly never going to become your friend. And like we did the other day, usually when I do this, I do not have any reservation in maintaining the discussion as colloquial as possible. I'm trying to avoid using scientific terms which are too sophisticated. I'm trying to get around with other words. From this point of view, my past as a teacher at university is very helpful. Not that all university teachers are able to do that, but when I was teaching, my major objective was to send a message across, regardless of which terms I was supposed to use, because at the end there is always time to tell that particular things should be called in that way. But what is important is to understand all the concepts and the ideas behind. So I was doing that first. And I do exactly the same with the farmers. I don't want to embarrass them, because I don't have to show them how much I know, because this is not the reason why I'm there. The reason why I'm there is to see whether some of the things that I know could be helpful to solve some of the problems. So that another question that I try to ask as soon as possible is if they can tell me what their problems are, what is their perception, because if I'm not able to develop a type of collaborative research, which is obviously directed towards solving what they think is their problem, well, then there is not much difference with what has been done in agricultural research until now. Why? By doing this is basically asking the farmers to set the research agenda, even if it's not done in those exact terms. And all these, I think, if it's repeated over time, if there is follow-up, if you make promises, if you only make promises that you can keep. No, forget about the promises that I will come in my next visit with my wife that I did not keep, but those that I make to the farmers, I try to never make promises that I cannot keep. And I try to be very honest in telling them that that if nobody has solved the problems until now, it means that the problems are difficult. And what I'm going to suggest is only one possibility to solve the problem. It's not the solution. So I always make clear that, and an example is where we are today, where we were yesterday. These are very difficult environments because of this mismatching between rainfall and temperature, which makes the life of the crop and the life of the farmers, of course, very, very difficult. Is the only thing that we can do is to bring them possibility of making a choice directly in their field. So that's also important to give them the impression that you're not there with the magic stick will solve the problem from one day to another. And in fact, this is important because in some cases farmers were under the impression that the process is much quicker. I think we got example of some farmers in Garmsar that, and in that case you have to reflect on the fact that probably this was not made sufficiently clear from the beginning. So that these are all episodes which are very useful because it helps remembering me of the mistakes that I continue to do, that sometimes you simply forget because you go to a place, you have been traveling perhaps all the night, you had a very short, very little sleep, and then you're probably not as fresh as you are supposed to be, and inevitably you forget to ask some question or to create the right atmosphere. And then in the long term, these are the consequences that suddenly you realize that you have raised expectations above what you were supposed to do.
You already shared a couple of memories, but I wonder if you have one or two memories that are very dear to you about that when you think about your relationship with farmers, when you think about how happy you are about having been able to establish this kind of relationship, what are the things that really stick in your mind?
Well, one is when we started participatory plant breeding on a number of crops in Eritrea, and we had this field day where the farmers did a selection. Of course, there was quite a bit of introduction of why we're doing all this and so on. Eritrea is one of the 10 poorest countries in the world, so there is a great need of finding something which produces a little bit more food. People are really starving in that country. My colleagues are actually losing weight, becoming skinnier and skinnier on every visit. And at the end of this fast experience, I asked the farmers to stay a little bit longer to have a little bit of conversation. And, as usually do in Africa, they sat under the trees. They don't like very much to be under the sun. And then I asked farmers, I said, well, what do you think about this day? Do you think that you've been wasting your time? And then one farmer stand up and said, well, this has been one of the most beautiful days of my life. You must have come from the sky, from the sky. And I said, yes, I arrived yesterday with Lufthansa. And then there was a big laughter. And then this is going on. I was told that this went around in the village for several weeks after that visit. Another interesting episode was when a gender specialist came to Jordan and interviewed a number of women who had been working for many years in the participatory program. And she asked them a very simple question. She said, what is this program means for you? And one of them said, I said, what do you mean? This is our life. And then you really know that you're doing something which is changed. Well, I've seen households developing, adding another room, adding a better toilet, the farmers buying a motorcycle. These, to our eyes, seems to be small things, but if you are 30 kilometers away from the nearest medical doctor, and your child gets sick at night, and the only possibility for you is to walk 100 meters, go on the asphalt road, and pray your God that somebody drives at that time of the night and takes you down to the doctor. Buying a motorcycle is a major breakthrough in your life. And and I've seen these sort of things happening because the varieties were illegal a little bit more. They were selling the seed, and so. From this episode, actually, the question is how can you multiply these by few hundred or few thousand of these cases to millions?
But when you speak, I mean, in general, I think what always impresses me, you say that the basis of this relationship has to be respect. What impresses me is I think you have a very deep capacity of empathy with the farmers, no? When you say that you can imagine how it would be if you didn't have a motorcycle and your child was sick and you were 30 kilometers, you're really, it's empathy, no?
Oh yeah, well, I found myself, I don't know, I mean, I don't have an explanation, but when I'm sitting with them for that time, which can be half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, I forget everything about me. I'm able to forget about who I am, and I become one of them. And I'm able to, but also because I've been with some of these families for as long as 15 years, so I know exactly what the problems are. I mean, at the end of 2008, in September 2008, which, as you remember, was a big drought in the region. It was a drought also here in Iran. It was a drought in Syria, in Jordan, in Iraq. And I was sitting in a household. This is a place where, when there is a lot of rain, they will get about 200, 250. Most of the time they get less. That particular year they got 53 millimeters and no germination. And this was September. They did not harvest a crop. I was surrounded by 10, 12 farmers. Some of them have already sold all their sheep because they needed some cash. Some of them have sold 80% of their sheep. They have no money in their pockets and they have no seed for planting. This was September. Planting is usually November, December. So they were desperate. And I remember that I was thinking, when I was looking in their eyes, I said, how could a scientist understand what drought means at the level of a family, not at the level of photosynthesis in the plants, which is also very important. But to understand what I remember, I had tears in my eyes because I have tears in my eyes now that I remember on that occasion. Try to imagine, you are leaving and you know that at the end of the month you will get a salary, you will get that amount of money, and these guys in front of me did not know what the future will be, and at that moment somebody entered the room with a tray full of food for me. And I think anybody would have been there with that sort of attitude of really understanding that situation. And then, of course, this gives you this gives you a great strength in understanding, because at that moment our relationship was such that I ran back to Icarda. It was already too late. The next morning, the first thing that I did is to tell my technician, my 6 technicians, stop doing whatever you're doing. I want to have an inventory of all the seed that we can get rid of. And we made 2 or 3 trucks of seed that I shipped to this village. I tell them to plant with a very light seed rate, so at least they can cover as much ground as possible. And then we save that village. And this was all seed that basically didn't have much value for us. We always have mountains of extra seed that we move from one place to another. We have to protect from rats, we have to protect from insects. And that year I think we made the best possible use of all that.
It's all of what you're saying, it's so much on the level of the individual and the person and your own emotional capacity, you know, and also your philosophy of life. It seems to me a very personal relationship. And then we're confronted with institutions, governmental institutions, and these individuals are embedded in these institutions. As you said, it's also cultural, it's your cultural context. How can someone in a developing country